Agency. And while their presentation is predominantly, for some of the statistics and some of the facts, are U.S.-based, what's really important is that it truly is a global, it's a global issue. And some of the suggestions that they're going to make and some of the processes they're going to discuss can really be applied on a global basis. And that's what we're trying to do at IFMA and through World FM Day, is to touch everyone on a global basis to continue to move the FM profession forward. So thank you so much for joining us, and happy World FM Day. And I'm going to turn it over to two of my favorite ladies.
Thank you, Tina. I'm really excited to support World FM Day as well by presenting today, and I want to give a bit of background of myself. My name is Lynn Baez, and I started my journey in sustainability when I became a researcher for the Environmental Protection Agency here in the U.S. I found myself in my very early 20s in fly fishing overalls in a swamp collecting samples, and I said to myself, I don't think this is the way I want to continue supporting sustainability in my career. I felt I could contribute to sustainable practices through the built environment. Through the last 15 years or so as an FM, it makes me feel good when I can go home and talk to my daughter about how I'm contributing to the betterment of our world. Having led many sustainability efforts for Dr. Pepper Snapple Group in my previous role, and now being on the IFMA Board of Directors supporting sustainability in my role with the board, I can continue to display how the creation and management of the built environment has such an impact to our world. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce Alana, the other speaker today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alana Dunoff. I am an IFMA Fellow and an FMP. I have also my master's in Facilities Planning and Management and 22 years experience in facilities. I consider myself a strategic facilities planner, and for the past 12 years I've had my own practice here in the Philadelphia area where I live. I've been on the IFMA Board of Directors and a longtime advocate for facilities management education. I also have, for the past 12 years, been an adjunct professor. I currently have been I'm at Temple University here in Philadelphia as part of their facilities management bachelor's program, which has just been an absolute joy to be a part of and to help to inspire and find the new emerging leaders of our profession. Two other things I want to share with you as we go forward here is that I am a little bit of a reluctant data geek. I keep trying to say I'm not, but it turns out I really just am. I have come to realize over the years that data is at the core of everything, that it helps us make our decisions, and that good data is a part of what we're doing. And so my focus on the presentation today will be quite a bit on the data side of this our whole initiative here. And then the other piece I want to say is that, unlike Lynn, I actually have very little. I'm really a newbie in sustainability, and something that I have been in the past couple of years learning when one of my clients asked me to help them build a sustainability initiative. And so this has been an interesting process for me to understand the resources and the things that are out there. So I have not been fly fishing out in my overalls, but I've been pouring through resources instead. The other thing that Lynn and I wanted to tell you is sort of how the two of us even came together on this whole project. It was a couple of years ago already at World Workplace, and we got to talking about what we're doing and what we're working on. And as it turns out, we were both working on sustainable programs for our respective companies. And we were both being asked by these companies to figure out how to integrate sustainable initiatives into our organization. And we thought it would be kind of neat if we could tell a bigger story using both of our companies as case studies. And so you kind of get two for the price of one here. So that's like a sustainable and efficient of your time. So if I actually could see everybody in attendance today, this is where I'd look around in the audience and I'd say, how many of you look like you remember the 1990s? And so since I can't do that, I will just say that we know that in the 1990s was a really long time ago. And in the facilities world, it was actually a pretty big deal. 1990s was when the American with Disabilities Act came about. And this was kind of a rockin' thing that happened in facilities, because all of a sudden facilities managers were scrambling to make sure that their buildings, their facilities, were able to provide accessible access to everyone in lots of different ways, shapes, and forms. And so for years after this act came out, there were educational programs and seminars and separate things that talked about ADA. You took an ADA class. Colleges, universities had ADA courses and classes that were separate from the regular curriculum. And this is how we were. We went to, well, it wasn't World Workplaces back then, but IFMA conferences or BOMA conferences or any other built environment conferences, and everybody talked about ADA, ADA case studies, ADA this and that. It was seen as very much as a separate thing. But then over the time, ADA has become just part of how we think. It's part of our standard operating procedures, integrated into everything that we do. And Lynn and I believe that sustainability is finally shifting into this mindset as well. One doesn't really have to look very far to understand that sustainability is no longer a fad. It's clearly here to stay, and that we can no longer see it as something separate. So just like ADA, sustainability has become a part of our vernacular.
As you can see here, many of the accrediting agencies and standard organizations are global in nature. ISO standards, for example, can be used to build your sustainability framework. The Global Reporting Initiative, the GRI, is a reporting tool, for example, that Dr. Pepper uses in its displaying its overall sustainability effort. So this is just a sampling of some of the different global tools that you can use in regards to sustainability.
So if it's clear that, in facilities, we have gotten really very good at implementing sustainable projects. We can find greener products and find greener services. We're doing a great job at managing consumption, utilization, and we're doing more recycling, and we're putting in better lighting, and the list goes on and on. We're really great at implementing projects. So the question becomes, how do we truly integrate sustainability into our daily processes so that we're not doing sustainability, but that sustainable practices are integrated into everything that we do? So here is our plan for the next hour or so. We'd like to give you a brief little history background of our two companies, and then we'll focus on the two main cores. The first one is about data, how to collect data, sustainable operations data, what to collect, how to organize that data, and this is Alana, and I will be sort of leading that conversation and that effort. And then the second piece is about the integration. And here Lynn is going to be focusing on communications and building teams and getting buy-in, internal and external communication processes, building critical vendor relationships, which is such a core part of this whole process, since we rely on our vendors to do so much of our work for us within our organizations. And then we'll also spend some time talking about tracking, measuring, and monitoring for continuous improvement. And then we'll have a wrap-up, and then Tina will lead us into any Q&A. And again, we ask you, if you have questions throughout the session, to go ahead and throw those in, and we'll get to them at the end of our chat.
So at this time, we'd like to do a quick poll. For those on the webinar today, can you put in your chat field, as it shows right here, are you tracking sustainability data? We'll give a moment for everyone to respond. So overwhelmingly, as we can see, many of us on this call, on this webinar today, are tracking data. So we hope that we can provide you that the tools and tricks that we found through this process of our two case studies will help you through your path. A lot of us will begin with going through our two companies.
Okay. Thanks. The company that I'm going to talk about, the company is called Pjm Interconnection. They are located in Philadelphia suburb. And I've been consulting with Pjm for about 13 years. Pjm is actually an acronym. It stands for Pennsylvania, Jersey, and Maryland. They were formed in 1927, and they are the largest regional transmission organization. Essentially, they coordinate the movement of wholesale electricity. So they're the largest in the world. And they have two primary focuses as an organization. They operate the wholesale electricity market, kind of like the Wall Street of energy, the buying and selling of energy on a daily basis, as well as in demand, a day ahead and day after. They also manage the high voltage electricity grid to ensure the reliability for more than 61 million people. So said another way, they keep the lights on. So this graphic here is a way of illustrating it. The dark blue is the section that Pjm controls, a fairly large section of the mid-Atlantic states, Pennsylvania down through Kentucky and over to Chicago. And that's sort of 61 million people, including Washington, D.C. And I have a little cocktail tidbit for you as well. If you look on that map and you see the difference between the light blue, it says Eastern Connection, and then the United States, that line there that comes down between the white and the light blue, those are the Rockies. And the little cocktail tidbit here is there is no transmission connection, no energy, no lines, no power poles that go over the Rockies. And so the United States is actually split in two when it comes to electricity. So a little bit more about the Pjm facilities. So they have 4 buildings on their primary campus, which is about a 250,000 gross square feet of space. And they have 2 live control centers, one on that campus and then one in another remote location. And they have about 850 employees and contractors that work on the campus and in the facilities. A couple other things I want to tell you about Pjm is that they're an energy company. They think about energy consumption all day long. They implement sustainable projects all of the time. It's sort of part of what the facilities group does there. They're always thinking about making changes and retrofitting and upgrading and things like that. But they've never had a formal sustainable program, no initiative, no sustainability czar, no anything like that. So they've just been doing it, but never actually sort of tracking it. They've also never tracked their data. No, they never really looked at their utility, consumption, or utilization in the way you would if you were thinking about sustainable programs. And then the final issue and sort of challenge with Pjm is that they have two of their buildings are control center buildings, which operate 24/7. Their job is to keep the lights on, and so these 2 buildings in particular, their redundancies have redundancies, and so making them energy efficient is very hard to do because of the nature of the buildings. So a lot of our effort, even though we've tracked these control center buildings, we know that it's very hard to manage energy utilization in those particular buildings. So that's a snapshot of Pjm, and I'll turn it over to Lynn.
Great. For those on the webinar that may not be aware, Dr. Pepper Snapple Group is a beverage company. Through the course of my tenure there, they transferred from a brand management company to an end-to-end solution. So they do direct store deliveries, warehouse deliveries, and they run manufacturing as well. Up front, I will say that my 2 favorite products are Snapple and RC. It's probably the #1 question I've been asked while I was in my tenure at Dr. Pepper Snapple Group. And if after this session anyone would like to share their favorite products, I'd be more than happy to hear. As we move to the next slide, I want to give some details surrounding Dr. Pepper Snapple Group. Dr. Pepper Snapple Group has manufacturing plants in both Mexico and the U.S. As a major water user, how they leverage their communities and support their regional environment is highly critical to its employees, shareholders, and consumers. Many of these impacts are on natural springs or natural water resources. Dr. Pepper Snapple Group has brands that are over 100 years old, yet because of its acquisitions, mergers, and demergers, it's only a 5-year-old company. BPS had to build an organization that could communicate how they were performing from the social and economic perspective. Their initial goals, as I believe we're going to show in a moment, its initial goals were to present a significant impact to the regional environment at their headquarters, be able to track and measure how they were performing at their physical plant. They also had to build a system to respond to corporate, social, and environmental activities as well. Similar to what Alana mentioned, they had a lot of great initiatives, but not a program in place. So our first objective today is to really provide examples to the group on data collecting practices.
Okay, and this is Alana again, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about data, and Lynn will jump in as necessary. One of the fun things about having two presenters on a seminar here is we're going back and forth and making sure that we give each other the proper control and pass along. So bear with us if we need a moment here or there. So I'm going to focus the first part of our conversation, again, on the collection of data. And in any process, having good data and good information should always be our first priority. And from my perspective, the first step is really building a baseline of data, essentially, picking a point in time. I like historic data. I like having data that goes back a period of time because it provides you trending information and a lot of detail that goes forward. So figuring out where you're going to draw that line in the sand, whether it's starting this month or going back a year or even going back a 2-year, but figuring out what works for your organization. And the next piece is about identifying the data that is actually critical to you and your organization. We far too often collect more data than we need, but this is about collecting the things that are important to you, the key performance indicators, the performance measures, or the things that you just might be curious about. It's also really important to collect data consistently, to find a way to easily put it into your processes so that it's not 4 months and 6 months or a year later and you realize you haven't collected anything. That makes the process very onerous. And so in creating baseline data and collecting information, it's figuring out how to collect data that you can manage easily and do it very quickly and very easily without it being a whole project or something that takes a lot of time. And again, the shout out to sort of not collect data that you won't use or you don't care about. We really often just collect way too much information, or we have so much information available to us that it becomes so unwieldy that we don't do anything. So this is about starting off slow and identifying data that actually matters to you. Since I told you I was a little bit of a data geek, I want to kind of expand on this idea for a moment about how powerful smart data can be and my methodology, my process of thinking about data. To me, data is the cornerstone of how we make decisions, and I'm really fascinated by how we can harness the power of data to really achieve actionable knowledge and making smart decisions. And the graphic that you see in front of you is sort of my attempt at trying to illustrate this idea that we must have good data. We need to have good, smart data, and how we get that data, whether it's from surveys or interviews or from our automated systems, which is massive amounts of data all by itself, that data must be good, that data must be smart. And it must be smart and needs to be strong because that data feeds into our performance measures. These are our metrics, our targets, our best practices. These are the ways we measure and monitor our performance. This is how we align ourselves with our organization, how we reach our goals. But it really doesn't just stop there, because that data goes from those performance measures into our decision tools. And these are the processes that we use to make critical and impactful decisions in our organization. So if we have smart data, we have a much better chance at making smarter decisions. Bad data can only lead to poorer decisions. And throughout this presentation, Lynn and I will be highlighting many of these tools and processes. We'll be looking at data, we'll be talking about metrics and benchmarking and dashboards, and we'll even be talking a little bit about RFP documentations. So you'll see as we flow through this system, some of these elements will come through and come together. So I'm going to talk a little bit about PJM's their sustainability initiative. There were really two focuses that they had for their project when they asked me to get involved a couple of years ago. The first was to collect operations and baseline data. They really wanted to be able to understand their existing conditions. They realized they were really doing so much, but that they had no idea what they were doing and how well they were doing it. And so this was about drawing a line in the sand, understanding their existing conditions of some operational data. And it was also about being able to tell some sustainability stories. There was this grassroots effort to develop this sustainable initiative program, and we thought that we could be able to, if we had the right data and information, we could show the good stuff, the good projects, the good results that they have had so far on their campus and in their organization. But we needed data to be able to do that. The second piece was about building a sustainability team. They, again, using kind of a grassroots effort, kind of from the bottom up, wanted to create an organization and a team that would really educate and engage employees in sustainable processes. They also saw this team as a group that would help to evaluate future initiatives for sustainable projects as a way of getting larger buy-in from the overall organization. One of the challenges with PJM is that because of who they are as a company, they have members who generate energy, are their members of the company. So they could have a member who's a coal generator and someone who's a solar energy generator. So as a company, PJM can't put out some lofty mission statement and say, we want to reduce carbon footprint, because that would probably not be looked on too favorably by some of their energy members. And so the sustainable initiatives have to come more internal and be about good stewards in the organization. And as a company, setting the right examples internally, even if they can't fully say it externally. So the data that we collected, we looked at a number of areas of the universe of possibilities of data that we could collect. And so we started with sort of 4 primary operations. And quite frankly, we chose these because they were the easiest data to collect. And we wanted to have a success quickly, and we wanted to start off slow and have this thing be manageable for us as well. We also decided it would be beneficial to, again, have historic data. And so we wanted to be able to look back and be able to see trends. And so we went back for collecting data, in some cases as far back as 2010 when we started this process, which meant that we were going through old files and utility bills and dusting off things and calling companies for data and information so that we could build some history out of our information. We also had 5 unique buildings that we would be collecting data on separately as well. So we knew that this was going to be a Herculean effort, and we wanted to keep this manageable for ourselves. So as you can see, we focused on utilities, looking at electricity, gas, and water. We focused on waste. They had actually recently moved to a new organization that had a 100% landfill diversion philosophy, and so we were looking at the company's ability around composting, recycling, and their trash to steam. We also looked a little bit at custodial and office supplies, and I'm going to show you this data. So the raw data, this was most definitely a labor of love. Every time I look at this, these couple of spreadsheets, I grin and sigh at the same time. And this, what you see in front of us, nothing fancy here. This is Excel spreadsheet data that's been put in, and this is just a part of one building's worth of data. And you can see, if you're looking, you can see the 2010 data and 2012 data and 2013 data, sort of line by line information, looking at invoices and pulling out data. And I will tell you that I would give the shout out to the co-op who actually input all this manually. And if you ever are thinking about a project like this and you have facilities management students or a program nearby, this is a great summer project for them to work on. So this is where our first effort and our largest effort really lied, was gathering this kind of data. And it wasn't pretty and it wasn't easy, but ultimately, as you'll see, it was actually pretty effective. And so once we got kind of the raw utility data sort of pulled out and started to work on a process for collecting this information, we then moved to some other areas, like looking at our vendor partners. So we thought that green cleaning was an area that we could glean some initial data from fairly easily. And so we went to the vendor partner and basically asked them if they could create a report for us regarding their successes towards green cleaning within the organization, looking at the materials, equipment, cleaning processes, and so on. And getting this data actually proved to sort of challenge my data geek sensibilities a little bit here, because I was really relying on the custodial company to report their green cleaning processes. And this report, which is from 2013, which actually looks exactly like the report from 2014, was sort of their attempt to provide us data. And so we see that the restroom products, they report as being 85% green. Daily cleaning products, they reported at 65% green. And overall, they estimated that PJM's green cleaning is about 72%. So one of the things about this, though, and we'll get into this a little bit more later, and the challenge is that we really have to rely on the vendor data, their own sort of subjective opinion, to provide us this information. And yes, there is some qualitative data based on this. So for instance, in the restroom products, they can look at exactly what's green, what you can buy versus what you can't buy, and what PJM was actually procuring. But there's a lot of subjective in these percentages as well. And so it just calls into question a little bit of, can we really report that we're 72% green, because we really don't know what that compares to. So that was sort of an interesting challenge that we faced in collecting data along the way. The last example I want to give you about getting data from our vendor partners, this one was a little bit easier and a little bit more data focused. This was from Office Depot, who they use for their office supplies within the organization. And again, this was a really easy one. We haven't focused that much on procurement still, but this was an easy one because these reports were so readily available to us. So this was kind of another low-hanging fruit piece. And this data is actually kind of interesting for us. Again, the vendor is reporting this information, and it's based solely on the purchasing of green products. And it might be a little bit difficult to see on your screens, but for instance, in 2012, we were purchasing about 31% of office supplies were considered green products. And then in 2013, we see there was a little bit of an uptick to 33%, which was great. And then we got the report for 2014, and there was actually a plummet of 29%, which was kind of surprising, to me as I was looking at this. And to the best of my knowledge, nobody else had ever looked at all three of these years together. And while there hasn't been a really big deep dive yet, one of the things that became very clear was the purchasing of ink and toner has actually steadily increased over the past couple years as well. And probably one of the least green things out there is ink and toner. And so for some reason, there was an uptick in the purchasing of those kinds of products, surpassing paper, so therefore leading to that decrease. And this is, again, one of the reasons why I love having historic data, because I really don't think that anyone else would have seen this change without looking at this data coming all together. So thinking about the dashboards and metrics. So now we have a lot of data. We have Excel spreadsheets and data from our custodial group. We have all this information, and sort of now our question was like, what do we do with it? How do we manage all this data? How do we help understand what it is, and how do we help it be smart and to help it work for us? So we created a dashboard, a very basic low-tech dashboard. And so this is part of that dashboard. I'm going to walk you through it a little bit and kind of show you what we did and how we started tracking information as part of this tool. So the first part was really just sort of breaking this down into sections. And so in this case, you can see it's broken down by electric, water, and gas, by the main utilities that we were collecting. And then we broke it down by building. Again, we knew that we couldn't just have lump sum because of the use of some of our buildings. With the control center, the two of the buildings that are control centers, we knew that they were going to use more of everything, and so we wanted to manage that in the process. So we really looked here at gathering the aggregate information that we did from all the raw data and putting it into totals, looking at consumption and costs. And you can see in the spreadsheet, we went back, and the spreadsheet, this shows from 2012, although we do have actually 2010 data, back to 2010 data as well. But we went through and looking at the individuals, looking at both the utilization and the actual costs. And again, we have this for the past 3 years. On the second half of this spreadsheet, we started looking at our benchmarking, at our external opportunities to learn more and try to understand, well, here's what we're doing, how do we compare to the rest of the world? And so here's where I reference things like IFMA's benchmarking report. They had an operations and maintenance report that we referenced, and I used that as a really helpful tool and guide to help me, the newbie, the novice, understand how do we benchmark data, how do people talk about these kinds of things and compare themselves. And so here's where we learned about the energy use index, and we're able to create that formula which uses a factor and their gross square footage to be able to compare our data to others. It kind of normalizes the data to compare it to other organizations. And so here we're bringing in that benchmark and starting to look at that data. So this is a continued sort of work in progress, and we're continually updating it. 2015 is being updated, but I just don't have it. Here in this graphic. Second half. I'm sorry. Oh no. I'm sorry. So the second half of this dashboard is more of the operational sort of non-utility stuff. And here's where we tracked our information around trash and recycling, as well as our green cleaning and our procurement. And I haven't talked a lot about trash yet, no trash talking, but this was actually a significant project and process for PJM, and a story that they are pretty interested and excited about telling. They have been tracking they went to a new vendor a couple years ago, actually in the middle of 2012, and since then they have actually seen a significant reduction in the volume of trash, which we think is for a number of reasons. One is we think they're doing a better job of recycling. They also added composting in from their cafeteria, which also changed some of the waste that was leaving the facility. But I mentioned also that they have been doing a lot of renovating of their buildings. And I think pre-moves, everybody's throwing a lot of stuff out. And so we had these year or two where everybody was really, there was a lot of trash because we were really throwing things away as the organization was getting ready to move and people were moving in and out of buildings. And now that that has sort of normalized, we're seeing sort of a decrease in the overall tonnage of trash. But we're also seeing increases in general recycling, and so we're seeing a shift as well. So we think some of the programs that they've implemented they're getting smarter and better at that. And here's where we've been able to set up some benchmarks and some targets as we move forward. And here's where other programs, they're actually going to be changing their trash cans and doing some other things to continue to educate the staff on how to do a better job at recycling going forward. Like there's a whole funny marketing campaign that they're getting ready to do to encourage people to not put their caps back on any water bottles or soda bottles that they have, because the caps are not recyclable, and when you keep the cap on, it also has volume, and so the trash compactors don't work as well when you have the air still left in those bottles. And so we're finding all kinds of fun little ways to encourage and change behaviors and habits for recycling. And then the rest of this dashboard just shows, again, the green cleaning and the procurement, the same data that I showed you before. And we haven't done anything with this really yet. It's really just data that we've continued to track, and it's on our list of things to do, but again, we know we can't tackle everything all at once. And as I finish up this conversation of some of my data here, I wanted to share two more graphics with you that kind of pull all of this together. So this graphic you see in front of you is actually the electrical consumption for the past 3 years of all 5 of their buildings. And as I mentioned, again, that they have done some renovations, and we think that the renovations, the insilium lighting and the new building systems and other smart energy efficient systems that they've put in place in all of these different buildings that they've renovated have actually reduced energy consumption in all of the buildings over the past number of years. We don't know which one of those programs or efforts did the most, but we know the collective effort really has decreased consumption in some buildings more than other buildings, but we're seeing some really positive. And so this is a really nice story to tell, and again is why I love historic data, because it shows you the trends, it shows you the information. And by the way, these are all very fully occupied buildings, and so we know that that's not a reason why there would be a change in utility consumption, in energy consumption. Now, water, that's a whole different thing. So this was a huge surprise as I was pulling all this data together and sort of making these visual graphics. There was this big sort of oh no that happened with water consumption. Almost all the buildings had like this major uptick of consumption. And when I showed this and presented this data to the facility staff, they all went, wait, what? What's going on? And immediately they said, well, gee, the one building in particular that has the CC note down there, there's a reverse osmosis system, which I admit I don't fully understand the complete details of it, but it must be dumping excess water. And so they've been able to go in and fix it. But without data like this, they may never have known or not known for a really long time. And when I first saw this data, I even went back to the raw data to make sure there wasn't any kind of error, human error in inputting the data, because again, it has to be good data to start with in order to make good decisions. And it turns out the data was good, and that we really had a problem in some of these buildings on campus that they were able to address. So now you got the picture of data at PJM, and I'm going to turn it over to Lynn.
Thanks, Alana. As you mentioned, we wanted to display many low-tech options because we know people are at different points in starting their sustainability journey. As you can see here, these DPS samples are just Excel spreadsheets on performance checklists and system and set points and monitoring. When we began our journey at the headquarters at DPS, we realized that we did not have a building management system. It was all manual control-based. So we needed to be able to understand how our air handling units and our system set points were being conducted in a manual basis, so that when we were putting in our building management system, we had that detail with us to program the system efficiently. This is a great way for your technicians to understand their HVAC systems and QA it. And also, as we went into a building management system and then to a CMMS system, we could generate these reports automatically, but we had a firm understanding of what we were trying to measure up front. Another way we used some spreadsheets and a very low-tech option was data collection from our third parties, from our vendors. We wanted to use a method that was simple to both understand and input, yet met the requirements that we were trying to measure. As we went further in our journey, we wanted to be able to display the data in metrics and in reporting terms that external auditors could be able to interpret easily. So as you can see here, we were looking at ongoing consumable purchases, and we had to include various suppliers in what we were procuring. Another sample submission was in part to utilizing portals. As you can see here, we were taking our water portal from the municipality from the city to determine how we were utilizing our water. On our property, we had a lab environment that did have reverse osmosis, similar to what Alana mentioned, and we needed to be able to extract this data and look at our sub-metering to be able to convert this data into a method that we could report on externally. The following two other examples really were forms that we had to build for our technicians to be able to input. We decided midstream through our sustainability journey that we wanted to go for LEED for existing buildings. And we needed to be able to have the accessibility of our sub-meters and indoor air quality information at a regular basis to track and monitor. Both of these reports were very simple for the technicians to enter and then submit into me and my team in the rest of the FM services group so that we could measure that data in a systematic fashion. So now, as Alana and I have shown you, we've collected a lot of data, and we wanted to be able to utilize this data to benchmark internally and externally, combine it all to tell a story. I'm going to walk you through some examples of how this was accomplished. As you can see in these integration elements, there are key components in many of these different categories. Some are in team building exercises for in-house support and external relationships, lead in building and sharing the story through communication, and then utilizing various resources for for the intranet, SharePoint, posters, social media, and finally, how do we keep this cycle going through tracking, measuring, and monitoring. As we went through this journey of sustainability, we found that our vendors were critical to our success, and I'll show you a few ways that we partnered with our vendors. I held a kickoff meeting to explain what their roles and responsibilities would be and how our relationships from daily transactions to contract management would change. This was an organic process. As we grew in our understanding of how DPS would want to interpret LEED credits and then apply them to the organization, there would be a reciprocal effect to our providers. Providers had to be flexible and adaptable to these changes. A good example of this would be in green cleaning supplies. We made several changes to what those supplies would be at our location and the required specifications of each material. It helps us weed out those greenwashing efforts, as Alana had alluded to previously, by some of our suppliers. Traceability of your materials and services is so important as they are a reflection of how your company exhibits its sustainable practices. And as you can see on the credits that we discuss with every single provider based on their category, we help them understand by their service type which credits would potentially apply and provide a potential change to our work practices. As I mentioned, we had to be able to tell our story as it was an organic one, and because it was organic, we realized that there would be new addendums, new contracts, and additional language added to our existing agreement. As a company, DPS had to make decisions on what they stood for. For DPS, it was water sustainability, the 3 R's, reduce, reuse, recycle, and emission reduction. All of this was incorporated into every policy, procedure, standard work operating, delivery, into all of our providers and our internal work documents. It was no small undertaking. And I would recommend that you utilize your procurement and legal teams. They're great resources on how to build this language in your documents, in your RFIs, RFPs, and RFQs. So as we went through this, and I call it a journey because it was definitely not a sprint, as we went through this journey, I'll show you a few ways that you can communicate your milestones and your quick wins. As you can see, we use a carbonation theme as our snapshot for our C-suite. And it helped us deliver on three things. It made it relevant to our company, as we're a beverage company. It was very easy to understand where we're on this journey to lead. And it provided the most pertinent information to share with our board of directors. They used this slide in particular to show where we were in regards to energy and atmosphere. And as you can see through this part of the project, we were 39% to our goal. We wanted to be able to understand how we could apply all of the credits in the energy and atmosphere category. And at that point, we were 39% into our goal of understanding how we could apply these credits. If we move forward to the next slide, you'll see how we communicated to our division leaders and our stakeholders.
Lynn, hang on a second. I'm
no worries.
Being slow.
Completely fine.
There we go.
As you can see, we're a heavy brand company, right? So when I would have my vice president or my senior vice president stop me in the hallway, they would not ask me how the materials and resources category was doing or the energy and atmosphere category. They would ask me, how's Snapple performing today, or how's the Venom category going? It really helped them gain some engagement in the process. I would say up front, VPS is a highly competitive group, and we track the progress and competition style. Each senior vice president was given a category, and they owned it from soup to nuts. Always remember your audience. Show them the communication style in terms that they care about. And for our organization, they cared about products and the tie-in to those products. Externally, we use social media to announce the achievement and I would say we got to the stop point of obtaining a gold certification in LEED existing building. We also used two other methods to communicate our success. We used it through our corporate and social responsibility report, and we built a business case that we shared with the USGBC and community organizations throughout North America. I would say, to me, the real final element is tracking, measuring, and monitoring to ensure continuous improvement. It's not just enough to collect the data. We need to be in a constant mode of tracking and monitoring because we know this is the only way to improve, change, and grow our sustainable effort in our organization. I would say, to me, integration is the place where you realize it's no longer a one-off project, and you realize that now it's a systemic process in your organization. Fortunately, there are a ton of tools that can help you track, monitor, and fully integrate sustainability data into your daily operations. And we'll walk through a couple. As you can see here, there are a variety of tools and data collection external tools that you can utilize. Alana is going to talk a bit about a couple that you see right here.
So this is, for those who are not familiar with, this is Energy Star, which is a United States-focused program. Through the Energy Star program, they have a concept called, or a system called Portfolio Manager, which is used as a way of data collection and tracking. And so instead of using Excel spreadsheets and data, you can use the Energy Star Portfolio Manager system, which has the benefit of having benchmarking data and other things available to you, and this information is free for you as you participate. And so after a year of collecting all that onerous data in spreadsheets, I actually convinced PJM to move forward with let's trying out Portfolio Manager and see how it works. And we did that, although it only collects energy and water consumption. So all the other things we collected we still can use and still are using the Excel document version of it. But here's just the quick example. We have 2 of the 5 buildings in the system already. So this is one of the buildings, and so the data was input, and we took it off of the spreadsheets, and that same co-op went in and put all that information in again, but just the summaries this time, the bigger picture data that he was able to put in, and able to then get the same kind of information. And one of the cool things that happened when he input this information is that it gave us the potential Energy Star score based on our data. And that 75 is actually the baseline of actually receiving your Energy Star certification. And nobody expected that and thought that that was, possible. And so now PJM is in process of doing the full audit to submit to become Energy Star certified in this particular building. And this is just one of the reports that it generates on energy performance. And here's where, this is way cooler than anything Excel or my own abilities in Excel could certainly do, where they're able to add additional metrics and external benchmarks, like being able to take the data and normalize it for weather, or other national using other national benchmarks and bringing other resources into it. So it just expands our effort completely. So we started off slow using Excel, but now we can take it up a notch. And I'm glad we started with Excel, because this would have seemed a little bit daunting to us and not exactly kind of getting our arms around everything. But now that we do, we're really able to take it to the next level. The other area that we wanted to talk a little bit about is sort of best practices. One of the challenges that I have had, and I think that Lynn as well, was that we could find some best practices and benchmarking, but in sustainability, it's not all that relevant and prevalent out there yet. And so when we were looking to compare ourselves and looking for guidelines, we finally just went to LEED, which was probably where we should have started in the first place. But as a good resource for best practices, how do we know if what we're doing is the right stuff? How do we set and define the projects that we should be doing or the areas we should be concentrating on? And so what you're looking at in front of you is the LEED EBOM, existing buildings for operations and maintenance. And this is the credit sheet. So this tells you how you can earn credits and points. And while PJM was not interested in any kind of LEED certification, we did think that this is an interesting way for us to sort of guide us through the process of being more sustainable. So for instance, if we went to water efficiency and we looked at indoor water use reduction, you get a pull down of information if you go to the credit library, and this shows you what the basic requirements are if you were to get LEED points in this area. And so here's some of the basic information and requirements that you needed. And we can now use this information at PJM to benchmark sort of internally and say, are we doing this? Do we have this? Do we have these elements? Do we have these fixtures? And if we do, we know that we have found the right bar, that we have the right best practices in mind. So this was actually a really great resource for us to find. And it's going to take us a long time to get through all the different elements here, but we think it's a good place for us to start when we're looking for best practices. Benchmarking, though, external data is actually a little bit of a different story. This has been harder for us for me to find and for us to find sort of out there. What you see in front of you is actually data from the IFMA benchmarking report, the operations and maintenance report. And it's a great resource for someone like me who was wanting to learn about the industry, about operations, about what's consumed and within the universe of sustainability and sustainable operations and data. But unfortunately, this report is from 2009, which means the data is from 2008, which is really old and ancient, by any stretch, and particularly in the world of sustainability that has taken so many leaps and bounds since 2008. So it was really interesting and helpful for us to learn about, for me to learn about the energy use index, and this is where I pulled this data into the dashboards. But beyond that, the data itself is a little bit more challenging. I did, though, take a look at it, though, and I tried to match where our ranges are for PJM data within the ranges of this older data, just to kind of see where we were. And again, because I'm a little bit of a data geek, I actually pulled that data together along with the portfolio manager had some data as well. So they had data that was from 2013. So the red lines are the portfolio manager data, median data, and the IFMA benchmarking data. And I was able to sort of look to see our overall big picture, which is pretty good. It shows that our 3 sort of vanilla office buildings are well within the sort of standards and best practices of this EUI index. And the other 2 buildings, those are our control center buildings, and we don't expect that they fit into any particular category. So this was kind of a nice little win for us also. Another tool we wanted to share there's some pretty cool calculators out there now. These are neat ways to be able to explain data in sort of everyday terms to people who no longer, apologize for that, for people who no longer just don't really understand much about the information and the data and the terminology. And so if you had 70,000 kilowatt hours of electricity, that equates to 48.3 metric tons of carbon dioxide, which equates to like 10.2 passenger vehicles. And so this is a way to communicate and use everyday terms to explain something that for many people is far too confusing or not fully understandable yet.
As we head to the top of the hour, this is Lynn. I wanted to quickly highlight a few of external reporting tools that you can use. You can have external auditors validate your data, and then that data can then also be included in the Global Reporting Index that you submit out publicly in your corporate and social responsibility report. Alana, as I think we're almost at the top of the hour, did you want to hit to the final thoughts that we wanted to share with the group?
Sure. I can. My computer seems to be hung up. I will just read through sort of our final thoughts here as my computer seems to not be having a good day. Our final thoughts here. You're not alone in this process, that this is part of a bigger picture, and I don't know, Lynn, feel free to jump in here if you have these in front of you at all.
Absolutely. I would say, to your point, Alana, that yes, none of us are alone in data collection, and there are so many persons within your organization and your vendor partners that can help you in your journey of sustainability. These partners all include your vendors, as I mentioned. They include other departments within your company, as well as others that will find a mutual beneficial outcome. So I would just make sure that utilize your partners, utilize your vendors, because they will help you in each reporting cycle moving forward. Alana, I'll let you complete the last set of thoughts.
Sure. So measure what matters. You don't have to measure everything. You just have to measure the things that you can affect. So keep that in mind as you're measuring. And as you're collecting data. Also remember to start small. You can turn one more, Lee, and that'll get us to, I think, to where we were. Sorry, one more. Okay, yeah, one more. All right, so there we go. So get the low-hanging fruit of data first. Find the things that you can easily do, that your organization can do, and use that data first. The next one is about internal versus external benchmarking. I think that Lynn and I both have found that external data is great, but internal data is even better and can be even stronger for you and your organization. I know for PJM that I would spend so much time looking for outside data that really was fruitless, and it was our internal data that really helped us know where we are, has found the issues, found the problems, and really helping us set our course. And then finally, we really encourage you to share your stories and your case studies. We just don't think there's enough of that stuff out there, and we would like you also to share what you know, the things that you're doing, so that we can all learn from each other as we figure out how to really integrate these practices into our daily operations.
Thanks, Alana. And I would also add to that one quickly is that use the sustainability IFMA portal that's available out there in IFMA.org. If you look up sustainability as a web portal, there's secondary information you can find, and you can share those best practices with your fellow FMers. I think we've hit the top of the time, so I'm not sure if we'll have an opportunity for Q&A, but I wanted to say thanks. Alana, did you want to share that as well?
Yeah, thank you. And if you would like, again, to contact Lynn or myself, our information's there. I thought we had 15 more minutes, but since if we do not, then so be it. If we have a little bit more time for some questions, Lee, Tina can certainly add to, help us out there with any questions that might be there.
Yeah, I think we have expired our time, but I do encourage you all to write down the copy the email addresses for both Alana and Lynn. And I know from personal experience they are very forthcoming in helping and mentoring and sharing. I like your last slide, share, 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 and that's what it's all about. And the only thing that I would say in summary is I think one of the most important points that you made was that sustainability is something that is no longer a standalone activity, that weaving sustainability into the fiber of how you perform your operations and maintenance and facility management, property management activities. I think that is really probably one of the most important things I heard you say, and to figure out what are the one or two first steps that you should change, that the audience should, somebody in the audience should change to make this, have you be able to move toward that goal. Because you put out some pretty good, really good goals for people to look at and some great tools. So thank you very, very much. And I think that was shared earlier, this will be available on the website under the FM Consultants Council. And also want to remind you that this is something that the FM Consultants Council does on a regular basis. You can look at this website right here and you'll see all of the great upcoming events that we have in the webinars. You also can go backwards and review some of the webinars that we have done in the past. So with that, I'm not sure there's a whole lot left on. Is there another slide? Maybe one more? Yes.
I'll just quickly mention that as far as councils, we do have several. I encourage you to visit the website on this PowerPoint presentation and visit some of them if any of them spark your interest. And we thank you for joining us. And we will be sending out the recording of this and the PDF version of the PowerPoint. And we apologize for running out of time for the Q&A section, but as mentioned, we do encourage you to contact them with any questions that you might have from the presentation. So thank you for joining us, and we appreciate your time.
Happy World FM Day.
Yes, happy
World FM Day.
Thank you.
Are we good?
Yes, we are. Thank you, guys.
Right. Sorry for the run. I for some reason had in my notes from when I was with Marcus that it was an hour and 15. So